languages and literature for helping us hold this much needed event today at Stanford. I really want to welcome back our very good friend, Arseniy Fedosiuk, her husband, Arseniy Fedosiuk, and Kateryna Prokopenko. And first, to begin this conversation, this discussion, and I feel like much needed conversation this time, I will first introduce and ask to give some of his remarks. Our very good friend of Ukraine and very important person at Stanford, in my opinion, Professor Francis Fukuyama. He's Olivier Nemolini Senior Fellow at Stanford University, Freeman Spogli Institute of International Studies, also known as FSI. He's also director of Susan Ford Dorsey Masters in International Policy, and as well, he's a professor at political science. So thank you to be with us. Great.
So thank you very much for inviting me, the Ukrainian Students Association. Thank you all for coming. We're at the end of the term, but I'm impressed at how many people have shown up, and thank you for defending Mariupol and for the courage and bravery that you've shown. I just want to say a little bit about where we are right now. I think that for the past month, we've all been focusing on the counteroffensive. It's been going slowly, and it seems to me it's a tough fight like the one that the defenders of Mariupol had to fight. But hopefully this is a fight that's going to lead to a very different kind of world once it succeeds, because it's going to lay the groundwork for a new Ukraine, and a new Ukraine is going to mean really a new Europe and possibly even a new Russia. I think all of us spent last weekend watching these amazing events taking place in Russia with Arseniy Fedosiuk and the apparent revolt that he was leading by the Wagner group. I think that whatever the short-term outcome of that very sequence of events is, it shows one thing that is very important for all of us to remember, which is that strong authoritarian states are really weak on the inside. They're weak because they do not have the support of their populations. They do not have the democratic courage that comes from being involved in a common project that everybody believes in. And for that reason, it's not surprising that they end up all fighting each other. And given the defeats that the Russian military and the Wagner group have suffered over these past few months, it's not surprising that there are a lot of recriminations and tensions within the high command. And so I just want you to remember that a strong authoritarian state looks very strong and invincible up until the moment that it crumbles. And I think that something like that, is very likely going on in Russia as we speak, and will obviously be accelerated as Ukrainian forces continue their offensive to a successful conclusion. Now, I just want to mention one thing that I think all of you ought to be thinking about. There's going to be a very important NATO summit in Vilnius that's going to take place in July. I believe it's the 11th and 12th. I've been involved very much in advocating for a certain outcome in the summit, because I believe that in order for there to be long-term stability in Eurasia and in Europe, Ukraine has to become a member of NATO. It has to become a member of NATO. And I think that the resistance to this is now beginning to crumble. I think that there was a feeling that you couldn't let Ukraine into NATO as long as there's an active war going on, that there's a very long application process. From what I understand, when this Vilnius summit happens, the members of NATO are going to agree that, like Finland and Sweden, Ukraine can skip the MAP stage, the military assistance program that other members are forced to go through. There's not agreement on letting Ukraine in at the present moment, but this is absolutely critical. I think past experience has shown that other forms of security guarantees are simply not adequate. There's been many promises made to Ukraine to help it in the past that have not been fulfilled. But I think it's only NATO membership with its Article 5 guarantee that in the long run will really provide the incentive for a future Russia to actually abide by any kind of a settlement. At the moment, I think any negotiation will be pointless because as long as Vladimir Putin remains in power, a ceasefire is simply going to be an opportunity for him to rest, to rearm, to rebuild his military, and then to begin the war again. So it's going to be a pointless exercise. And I think it's really only the possibility of Ukraine actually entering NATO that in the long run is going to be a sufficient guarantee. And by joining NATO, this may include things like stationing NATO troops in Ukraine to act as a tripwire, so that in case Russia begins the war again, there will be an automatic involvement. The specific terms of this are very complicated and they've yet to be worked out. But I think that that's really what we ought to be pushing for and advocating for. The other part of this equation, obviously, is what happens on the battlefield. At this point, other than showing our support for Ukraine and for its really incredible military, there's probably not much we can do. But on the political side, getting ready to support Ukraine in the long term is going to be really the thing we have to focus on. That's where my efforts are leading to, and I hope all of you will, help prepare the ground, because I think many members of NATO, including people in this country, are not quite there yet. We're not quite prepared to extend this guarantee. But I think that in the long run, if you're going to have peace and security in this part of the world and for Ukraine, this is really. So I'm just going to leave you with that thought. I have incredible admiration for, you fought in Mariupol or in any other part of Ukraine during this terrible war. I think that the solidarity that has been expressed across the Western Alliance has been really remarkable, and I'm very encouraged by that. I hope that we can keep it up over the coming, I'm not going to say months and years, I would say over the coming months, because I hope that we're heading towards a resolution that will not require years before it comes about. So with that, all I have to say to you is, Slava Ukraini!
So can you just play the video? We're going to start. We'll take a look at the.
After the Revolution of Dignity ended in 2014, the Russian Federation used the structural weakness of the Ukrainian state system to commit an act of unprovoked aggression against Ukraine. This resulted in the annexation of Crimea and in the attempt to occupy the entire southeastern area of Ukraine. The pro-Russian regime of Yanukovych had systematically weakened the Ukrainian army, so that in 2014 the armed forces of Ukraine could not resist Russian aggression on their own. Ukrainian civil society responded to this challenge by creating volunteer military formations, one of which turned out to be the Azov. Initially started in the eastern Ukraine city of Kharkiv as a partisan volunteer formation, it soon emerged as a special police force unit under the Ministry of Internal Affairs. It became known as the Azov Battalion. In May of 2014, using their proxy forces and paramilitary formations, Russia tried to establish control over Mariupol, the second biggest city in the Donetsk region. Enemy combatants captured administrative buildings and terrorized the civilian population. On June 13th, Azov and neighboring units waged an assault against enemy combatants and eventually liberated Mariupol from the pro-Russian separatist troops. Although Mariupol was liberated, enemy artillery continued to bombard the city. On January 25th of 2015, the enemy launched an artillery strike at this Hidny city district that led to the death of 31 civilians, including children, and 117 wounded. Azov conducted a military operation known as the Shirokine Offensive, aimed at expelling Russian forces from the outlying towns and creating a safe zone near Mariupol. The operation started on February 10th of 2015 and resulted in the deoccupation of 5 Ukrainian cities. The enemy was forced to retreat and move the artillery back to the east. Mariupol was saved. Azov operated as a special police force unit until November 10th of 2014, when it was transformed into a regiment within the National Guard of Ukraine. Azov began to evolve as a professional military formation of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. It was one of the first units in Ukraine to implement Western standards of military administration and tactical leadership. Azov Boot Camp is considered to be one of the most effective training courses. Depending on their personal qualities and skills, each Azov course graduate receives a military specialty. An individual can become an infantryman, an artillerist, a sniper, a scout, or even a sinologist. The primary requirements for all Azov members are competence, high morale, and a desire to expand their knowledge on a regular basis. Regardless of person's age, their origin, or previous occupation, if they want to fight for freedom, they can become part of Azov. Acknowledging the exceptional standards of personnel training, the Ukrainian High Military Command delegated Azov the execution of combat missions on the front lines. In 2019, Azov held the defensive line on the so-called Svetlodarsk Arc for 8 months, demonstrating high standards of initiative and tactical leadership. Hundreds of enemy combatants were neutralized. Dozens of enemy armored vehicles, UAVs, and radio location systems were eliminated. Azov has proven to be one of the most skilled and combat-ready military units in Ukraine. Azov saved Mariupol in 2014 and 2015. It gave the city an opportunity to develop in a peaceful atmosphere without Russian terror and assault. A beautiful city by the Azov Sea, Mariupol lived free and prospered. New businesses opened up, factories continued working, educational and entertainment events took place. This continued until February 24th of 2022. On February 24th, 2022, the Russian Federation launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, including rocket attacks. Mariupol was one of the first Ukrainian cities to meet the attack head-on. The Azov regiment decided to fight to the death and stay to defend the city. This was the same city that the Azov protected 8 years before and had become a second home to its soldiers. Mariupol was surrounded and the siege tightened. Despite the enemy's significant numerical and technical superiority, Azov fighters destroyed Russian tanks, vehicles, boats, and soldiers. The enemy continued to bomb and launch aerial strikes on civilian infrastructure. Hospitals, schools, and residential areas were devastated. The enemy purposely targeted non-military objects and thousands of civilians died. On March 16th, the Russians launched an aerial strike on the Mariupol Drama Theater, which had been used as a civilian bomb shelter. In the blink of an eye, 600 people perished. Azov fighters, side by side with other neighboring units, performed superhuman feats to hold back the overwhelming enemy assault. In cooperation with Ukrainian military intelligence, Azov arranged an unprecedented operation to deliver ammunition, medicine, and reinforcement via helicopters. On their way back, the helicopters carried out severely injured fighters from the besieged city. There was no chance to win this battle, but Azov kept fighting. Azovstal Iron and Steel Works became the last stronghold of Ukrainian forces in Mariupol. Surrounded, they began to build up defenses from all sides. Ammo, food, and water were scarce. The absence of medicine was catastrophic. Azovstal bunkers had many wounded who were wasting away and dying in agony. Medics tried to perform surgeries and save the lives of both military and civilians without the necessary tools and painkillers. Meanwhile, the Russians continued to bombard Azovstal from the land, sea, and air. People died under the rubble. The assault attempts did not cease. On May 16th, the Ukrainian General Staff gave the order to stop the defense. It was the only chance to save the lives of the Azovstal fighters. The heroic battle for Mariupol went on for 86 days, 82 of them spent being completely surrounded. The Azov Regiment followed the order and laid down their arms under clear conditions negotiated with Russia. But from the beginning, the Russian side showed no desire to honor even the basic terms of their agreement. Azov prisoners of war were tortured from the very first days of captivity. On the night of July 29th, Russia launched a terror attack on the Azov prisoners in Olenivka. Russians placed a bomb in the building where the Azov POWs were kept. As a result of the detonation, more than 50 people died and over 100 were wounded. This incident, known as the Olenivka prison massacre, is the only case when Russia committed a war crime in such an open and cynical way. More than 700 Azov fighters remain in captivity to this day. Torture and regular beatings became a routine event for most of them. But no matter how much the Russians wished for it, Azov did not disappear in Mariupol, and its history was not buried under Azovstal rubble. After a short period of treatment, fighters who were heavily injured and escaped from Mariupol on helicopters got back to the line and continued fighting on the southern front. In the winter of 2023, Azov was expanded to a National Guard brigade. Its high command consisted of the officers and sergeants who were returned from Russian captivity in the autumn of 2022. Azov is still actively recruiting new fighters. Its veterans pass on their knowledge and combat experience to new members. The brigade is preparing for the upcoming counter-offensive. Their main goal is to gain a significant level of professionalism and outfight the enemy on the battlefield. Azov lost all its equipment and weapons in Mariupol, creating a setback in military supplies that had taken 8 years to accumulate. The equipment was primarily received from Ukrainian civil volunteers or bought by individual Azov soldiers. Some parts of the equipment were destroyed in combat, and some were destroyed by the fighters deliberately, so they did not fall into the enemy's hands. For now, Azov needs support to compensate for the equipment and weapons that were lost. Azov's high command and its fighters know how to prove their effectiveness in combat and know how to use modern weaponry to defeat the aggressor. Victory can be achieved only by people, by their courage and their valor. Azov is nothing but these people, and they are outgunned.
And just to continue our conversation, short update, as we can, this is our second meeting with our dear friends from Azov, and a little update on the previous meeting that we held on September 30th of last year. We have Artur Lipka. He's now again fighting against Russian invasion in Ukraine. Vladislav Revoronyuk, Wikipedia, he received his treatment in the United States and got his prosthetic and was able to return to Ukraine to join his sister for her wedding. And George Kuparashvili has also rejoined Ukrainian armed forces and continue fighting. With that being said, I would just turn it over to you, probably Arseniy. We are very fortunate and glad to see you here. You were definitely missed last September, and if you just tell us the story, that anything you want to share with us about Mariupol, about your time you spent in Russian captivity, or the work that you do, all three of you actually, Kateryna and Yulia, that you currently do to support your brothers who are still in captivity and those who were able to be freed by now.
Thank you. First of all, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for joining us to hear our story. Yes, during the last meeting, I was slightly busy sitting in a Russian military prison. And half a year ago, I couldn't even expect that I will be sitting here on the free land, speaking to you, all of you. So for me, it's just a great stroke of luck, but not for all of us. Around 700 of our people are still in Russian captivity, or they've been kept in the most horrible conditions. The conditions for our captives are not the same for the captives from other units of Ukrainian army. And that's pretty obvious because we showed great results in Mariupol. And Russians, like in the list of hate, we always were like on the first places. Also, I want to say you during the last time I had no chance to practice my English. So because I was busy fighting in Mariupol, then sitting in Russian military prison. So I gently ask you, please don't judge me. I'd like to begin with my personal story because my personal story is deeply connected with the war, with Ukraine, with Ukrainian history, Ukrainian politics, and all these things. I'm 30 years old. I'm graduate of of National University of Kyiv-Mohyla Academy. I have a bachelor's degree, but I didn't get my master's degree due to revolutionary events in Kyiv and due to the war, because I had to choose between studying history and participating in history. And for me, it was more important to participate in history, to be where the action is when to study it. For me, all this story began, I think, in 2004. I remember the day when, from the news report from the TV, I figure out that Russians from the Eurasian Youth Union, yes, thank you. They climbed on the Khavarla mountain, the highest mountain in Ukraine, and destroyed the monument dedicated to the independence of Ukraine. I remember the day, it may be the first day when I felt like the real hate to our enemy. And from that day and later, I think I became conscious of the fact that sooner or later, the war between our states will begin. And I was right. Unfortunately, I was right. The war story for me began in 2014. I remember the days I was very afraid to trying to get on time with the war, because for that time, if you remember, Ukraine had success on the battlefield, because it was maybe July 2014, and Russian troops did not join the war yet. We were fighting only their proxy troops. We were fighting their special forces that were pretending to be like people from the Donbass. And for that time, it was. I thought that the war will end just in several weeks. So I gather all my thoughts, I gather all my courage, and went to the war. Before that, I had no military experience. I did not serve in army, so I was just a student, like many of us. Before our first fight, we had only 3 days basic boot camp. I got a chance to shoot several rounds from my AK, and that's all. And we had the pretty similar situation in other military units, volunteer military units. We had pretty similar situation in armed forces. So for us, it was like we try to say in the movie, that was a response from Ukrainian civil society. I think that the Russian-Ukrainian war, the Maidan, the Revolution of Dignity, the Russian-Ukrainian war showed all the world that Ukraine has great success in building direct democracy and in building civil society. Because our volunteer movement, I mean volunteers, military volunteers that came to the front line to fight, and civil volunteers, it's the only force that helps Ukraine to stand till nowadays. Obviously, Ukrainian state isn't strong at all. Ukrainian state is the most horrible type of state in the world, I think. But Ukrainian society, Ukrainian society is another story. And when you think about Ukraine, don't think about Ukrainian state. Don't think about corruption. Don't think about nepotism. Think about Ukrainian society. We have nothing to do with that. And it's also connected with the question. Sometimes people ask me why I joined Azov regiment. I joined Azov regiment because this military unit was born out of the war. It was born out of this direct democracy. And in our military unit, there are no such things as corruption, as nepotism. Azov gathered around itself people that came to fight, that came to help Ukraine gain independence and sovereignty, the true sovereignty. I think that in 1991, Ukraine obtained a fake sovereignty because Ukrainian political elite was deeply connected with Russian political elite. That was like the old communist elite, and those people are not representatives of Ukrainian society and Ukrainian national identity. The events we have now on the front line, that's like the fight for the true independence and true sovereignty. The first year of the war for me passed in the volunteer battalions. After that, I participated in the battle for Ilovaisk. Maybe if you're familiar with that, that was one of the biggest battles on this first period of the Russian-Ukrainian war. After that, we participated in some small battles. There was a lot of that for the time. In 2015, I returned back home, stayed there for several months, but then I realized that that our struggle isn't finished. And as for me, from 2014, like the war question became something personal. Not only because some of my friends died on the battle or during the combat actions, but all these historical questions for me are personal questions. Because in the Russian military prison in Taganrog, on the 1st of December, they gave us books. That was several books, some science fiction, some Soviet books, poor quality Soviet books. And one of the books, it was the book written by Albert Camus, The Rebel. I choose this book because none of my cameras in my camera have enough capabilities like to read such type of books. For me, it also was very hard because like in captivity they gave you the portions of food in captivity are as big as just to keep you alive. So your mental capabilities are on the lowest level. But still, I gathered all my brain to comprehend all the things. And in this book, Albert Camus wrote about that in our world, like we have two different dimensions, historical and personal. And he makes a great difference between that. I think for me, this war story brought me to the point that for me, the historical dimension and personal dimension are deeply connected. And we had the same thing for, I think, all our military volunteers. I started my service in Azov in 2016. I chose Azov also because even for that time, it was one of the most combat-ready military units in Ukraine. And our previous history and the history of the full-scale invasion of Azov Regiment, of other volunteer battalions or volunteer military units, brings us to the topic that the prime requirement, that the competence and motivation and morale is the prime requirement for militaries, not the training, education, equipment, nothing. In Mariupol, we had almost no Western ammunition. We had no Western weapons, Western equipment. We fought our enemy with old Soviet weaponry, and we showed great results, really great results. Just for you to understand, the city of Mariupol was defended by approximately 4,000 of Ukrainian soldiers, including women, non-combatants, medics, etc. I think it was around 250 direct combatants defending the city, and the city was assaulted by from 12,000 to 16,000 of Russian soldiers. So the ratio was 1 to 4 on their advance, and still we showed great results. I think the Battle of Mariupol was one of the most fierce battles since the Second World War. We didn't have like the same encirclement since that times. I started my service in Azov in 2016. Firstly, I was a team leader when a platoon commander. After that, I decided to join reconnaissance, because for that time in Ukraine, for the time when we had so-called anti-terroristic operation in 2019 and 2020, it was very hard for militaries to fight on the battlefield. We had Minsk agreements, first Minsk, second Minsk. We had some unofficial agreements with Russian Federation that didn't allow us to fight our enemy directly on the battlefield. And such units as reconnaissance, as sniper companies, reconnaissance company, they participated in the direct confrontations
More than anyone else.
More than anyone else. And as for me, it was very important, like, to maintain my presence on the battlefield. 3 months before the full-scale invasion, my contract in the Azov, in the National Guard of Ukraine, ended, and I resigned from the military. I returned back to my civil life. I started some business. I wanted to end my graduation paper to receive a master's degree, but the destiny had another plans for me. On the 21st of February, me and Yulia, we watched the Putin's address. He held the address to the General Assembly of Russian Federation, and during the address, he recognized the independence of DPR and LPR. And for me, that was a very pretty strong sign that the full-scale invasion will appear soon, just day by day. Honestly, from the Maidan, from 2014, from the anti-terroristic operation, I was conscious of the fact that the full-scale invasion will start or later. For me, for all my friends, that was like a fact. And we trained to face the enemy, to face the full-scale invasion. So on the February 21st, I gathered all my equipment and went back to Mariupol. For me, it was very important, first of all, to be with my military unit, with my brothers in arms, and secondly, I knew that the main, like the most fierce battles took place at the Donbass, because Donbass is the key for this war. Even not the Crimea, I think it's Donbass. And on February 23rd, I was in Mariupol, and for me, the war started in Mariupol. During the first week of the war, I was very happy with the fact that I got in time in Mariupol, because when the full-scale invasion started, a lot of difficulties with transportation, with trains appeared, and it was very hard to get to Mariupol for the time. And I was very happy that I got on time. Maybe it's not the right place to tell about all the killings of Russians on the battlefield. We're here to talk about some more conceptual things, but still.
It's a concept, actually.
Yes, but still, like the fighting, the killings is really not the concept. But when you want to defend your comprehension of history, of society, of your nation, you have to be ready to kill and to be killed. That's very important. Not only to kill, but and to be killed, obviously. War, of course, it's the most horrible thing in our life. Not the horrible. The prison is the most horrible thing in our life, because I compare like the most horrible days in Mariupol. Maybe it was the last weeks of Azovstal siege. That was pretty horrible, very tough, very challenging times. And even the most horrible days in at Azovstal plant, they were better than the happiest days in the prison, because in Mariupol we have freedom. We had freedom. You are a free person. Of course, there are great danger for you to be killed, but still you are free. In prison, you have no freedom at all. So, like in prison, in Russian prison, I realized what freedom means to me, and I realized that that freedom is the only thing that it's the only thing that deserve like the biggest sacrifices in your life. As you know, after the siege of Mariupol ended not so happy for us. There was some negotiations about our surrender, because for me it became obvious that our defense in Mariupol will collapse sooner or later. For me, it became obvious maybe at the end of March, because our enemy had total advance in the personnel, in armored vehicles, in all ways and means. Our surrender was negotiated. We received an order from Ukrainian High Command to lay down our arms, and we laid down our arms under some conditions, under certain conditions. The first conditions implied that attitude towards our prisoners match Geneva Conventions. That means that there should be no such things as tortures, beating, humiliating, and so on. The second condition implied that we should be released within half a year. That was from 3 to 4 months for soldiers and sergeants, and up to half a year for officers. Of course, from the very first days of our captivity, Russians showed no desire to honor even the basic terms of the agreement. They gave their word and they took the word back, as it was in the past days in history all the time. For some of our people, the tortures began from the beginning of their captivity. Even one friend of another my friend, he committed a suicide because he can't cope with all that hell in Olenivka. At the end of July, Russians arranged a terror attack upon our people. It took place in Olenivka. It's known as Olenivka prison massacre. How it was? Several days before the terror attack, Russians gave us a list consisted of 151 people, the list of Azov captives. That list was pretty random. There was soldiers, sergeants, officers, everybody. There was one thing in common: all of that people were from Azov regiment. After that, according to that list, they resettled the people to the building in the industrial area of that prison. Before that resettlement, they placed a bomb in the building, and on July 29, I think it was 11 p.m. People were just peacefully sleeping. They blew up the bomb, resulting in around 60 people died. After the explosion, they did not let medical personnel for several hours. So a bunch of people just bled to death. The next day, they invited some trash media, some pro-Russian media, and they tried to make a picture that it was Ukraine who targeted the building with HIMARS rockets. They even gathered a lot of pieces of HIMARS rockets all around the front line. But they were so stupid that those pieces have different serial numbers. So there were serial numbers from 4 or 5 separate HIMARS rockets. But still, for Russian society, that doesn't matter. They made such a picture. They showed that they can still kill our captives in the captivity. They showed they didn't honor any international laws. And actually, this issue brings us to the topic that in that particular area in Europe, international law doesn't work. The force and the power is the true law now in Ukraine, in Donbass, and it's very
This means.
Makes me worry or
yes,
concerning.
thank you. It's very concerning. Yes, it's very concerning because if you remember the last time when the international law stopped working, it was 1939, and the Second World War started. And now, when I analyze all these things, I think that every time then the balance of power stops working, every time then international law, the system of international affairs stops working, we have the world war. It was like when the League of Nations became an important organization, we had the Second World War, and now Russia is treating Ukraine in the framework of the Yalta-Potsdam Agreement, and for a long period of time, the collective West was treating Ukraine in the same framework. Now everything changed, of course. Ukraine and Ukrainian society and Ukrainian people show that Ukraine deserves its place in the deserves place like a free nation and like a sovereign state. And really, a lot of Ukrainians made really sacrifice their life for these efforts. Yes. I want to tell you about the most horrible place in this world. It's a prison, Russian military prison in Taganrog. At the end of September, we were transferred to the prison in Taganrog. It's a city on the western borders of Russian Federation. And when we compare our prison stories, all of us agree that the Taganrog is the most horrible prison from all military prisons in Russian Federation. For us, all the hell started in Taganrog from the very first day. Like tortures, beatings, torturing with electricity, all of that became a casual thing for our people in Taganrog. In Taganrog, I realized how small the portions of food can be. In Taganrog, I realized that there is
There's no worse place.
Yes, thank you. There is no worse place than Russian military prison. In Taganrog, they started a process of interrogation for our people because Russians need to feed their propaganda machine with false evidences. Like the most popular question they asked us was the question they asked who destroyed Mariupol drama theater. I think like everybody in Mariupol, no matter of their position, they are pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian. Everybody in Mariupol know that Mariupol drama theater was destroyed by Russian aerial bomb. Even some of Russia Telegram channels wrote about it. But of course, when they realized what they did, they deleted all these posts. All other questions are the pretty same quality of these pretty silly questions. But still, you have no other chance than to put guilt on yourself or on your comrades, because after several days of constant tortures, like that's the only chance for you to survive. I know that several people were beaten to death during these interrogations. As for me, interrogations went for 3 days. The first day was dedicated for beating and tortures. And at the end of the first day, my interrogator, I don't know, it was rather either a military prosecutor or the representative of Russian Federal Security Service. I don't know, it doesn't matter. At the end of the first day, like he decided to have a small talk with me, some kind of discussion. But that was like not the best place for discussion, obviously. And he told me one thing. He told me that, all right, you Ukrainians, you are just fooled. You are fooled by Europe, United States. They're using you. But we know that you Ukrainians, you don't hate us. You don't want to fight with us. But the Baltic states, the Baltic nations, I hate them mostly. And at that moment, I realized that, okay, if you hate Baltic nations, then Baltic nations should become like our strongest allies in this war and in our further geopolitical development. And for real, now in Ukraine, the ideas of intermarium, of Baltic Black Sea Union became more and more popular. But that's another question. In Taganrog, I spent 3 months. 3 months in total informational isolation. We even were not allowed to look at the window because it's a strict regime prison. There are a lot of stupid rules. There are a lot of some kind of theater of security, and you are very restricted in your actions. You're not allowed to lie on the bed during the daytime. You're not allowed to, you're allowed only to sit on the bench, and you can't even support your head with your hands. So when we tried to do that, we got punched every time. The one thing that supported me and my friends, I always tried to motivate them, not to. You don't have the right to break down in the prison. You don't have such right. You must survive, and you must keep your head and keep your mind healthy. I tried to motivate my friends all the time, and I told them two things. The first one, it was I told them, don't think about people who have better conditions than you, because for that time some of our people were released. They were already on the Ukraine mainland, the big land, like we called it. And I don't think about people that have better conditions. Think about people who have worse conditions than you. And in the prison of Taganrog, it was very easy to find people that have worse conditions than you. All the time, there are people that got beaten more than you, that passed through interrogations more than you, and so on. And the second thing that helped me to stay alive and stay conscious at that prison, the close relative of my wife, Yulia, Miroslav Marinovich, is Ukrainian. He was one of the founders of Ukraine Helsinki Commission. Yes, right? Yes. And he was a political prisoner in Soviet Union, and he passed through 13 years of Gulag. If you know what it means, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough story. And he didn't break up. When he was released, he continued his fighting for Ukraine. And now he is a rector of Ukrainian Catholic University in Lviv. Deputy rector, yes. And his story really gave me a lot of motivation. Luckily, on the New Year Eve, I was released. That was pretty interesting story. That was
Question, did you know that you're gonna be released? Because
No.
like, I know just from the story that we hear from outside, like from the fighters that been freed, some of them being transferred between different prisons. Like, so how this process was going through, like what was going through your head as you were like, you probably at the moment didn't know that you're gonna be released. Like, can you tell us just a bit more about that moment?
yes, really, they provide enough information about what is going on. Even more, the prison guard didn't know what's happening. They just received an order that they need to gather a bunch of people from the prison, and that's all. So they woke us up at 3 a.m. in the morning. When we went to the administrative building near our barrack. After that, they gave us a military uniform. That was the uniform we came to the prison.
From Mariupol?
Yes, from Mariupol. That was a witness of the Battle of Mariupol. So it's pretty like historical uniform. After that, we were taken to the airport in Taganrog.
How about the fake exchange?
Yes. Yes, there was a fake exchange on the 30th of December.
The day before.
Yes, the day before. Well, there is no difference in these stories, like the fake exchange and the real exchange, despite the fact that during the real exchange we were exchanged. So they took us to the airport in Taganrog, in the city of Taganrog. After that, we got a flight to Belgorod. When we
We switched to the bus.
yes, we switched to the, and those buses took us to the Russian-Ukrainian border. And on the border, like there are representatives of our military intelligence, Russian military intelligence. They switch the list of prisoners. And I saw the column of Russian prisoners. All of them were in pretty good shape. All of them were pretty look like all of us here in this room. Yes, just normal people. And I remember our column of Ukrainian prisoners. That was like those pictures from Auschwitz, because all of us lost maybe up from 15 up to 30 kilograms of weight. I weighed maybe 62 kilograms when I was released. So with my height, you can imagine how dramatic these losses are. All of our people have injuries.
Like
Injured. What's injured?
that someone's leg got injured, or
Yes,
they broke it off.
for all the people that came from Taganrog, we all had the right leg injured, because for 2 weeks before this release, everybody every day got punched in the leg. So that was, my leg was like one big hematoma. And the Russian prisoners in Ukraine, they are living their best life. The United Nations, the Red Cross, or any international organizations have unlimited access to them. They even have a right to work, to receive a salary, and they can spend that salary to buy cigarettes, sweets, everything. For Ukrainians, it's like some kind of medieval prison with tortures, beatings, and so on. So there is a great difference, and even Ukrainian society is disgruntled with the fact how Russian prisoners are being treated in Ukraine. They think that it's not fair, but still, Ukraine is pretending to be a democratic state. It's pretending to be a civilized state, and we can't treat them such as they are treating our prisoners in Russia.
Arseniy, I would like to come back to the story about your brothers who remain in Russian captivity and those who are free. But just a short question: when you finally was returned to big land of the Ukraine, what went through your head when you realized that you actually are free now? Can you like recall your feelings or your thoughts? What was going through your head when you actually knew that you finally back in Ukraine?
Right away, after we crossed the border, we started singing Ukrainian national anthem, and that was like fantastic. That was one of the like most prominent pictures in my memory. After the exchange, I haven't slept for 3 or 4 days because of like emotional uprising in me. And all our other prisoners have the same story. After that, we started our treatment. After that, I went to Israel to have a surgery on my back. After that, I came here to the United States. We worked in the U.S. Congress. We worked for the advocacy of our prisoners of war. We had a lot of meetings with both Democratic, Republican parties, with congressmen, senators, and I realized that not all people here in the United States are conscious of these facts of Russia-Ukrainian war. So it's very important to make these people aware of these problems. We have a lot of issues. Russia not want to release our people because Azov captives, Russia believes that Azov captives are high-valued captives. If you look at all exchanges that took place during the last year, you can see that our prisoners were exchanged only for the high-valued Russian prisoners. That was either Viktor Medvedchuk, the senior for Russian politics. It was Russian pilots. It was Chechens. It was yes,
Intelligence service.
yes, senior officers of Russian intelligence service, federal security service, or members of Wagner group, but not that Wagner group that were mobilized from prisons, but those who fought in Syria, the old Wagner group. So I don't know whom we need to capture to get all our people released. Maybe Prigozhin, maybe Shoigu, I don't know. But it should be like the most senior official, yes, some kind of VIP. Also, we have another issue. The United Nations closed the investigation of Alenivka massacre just because Russians didn't let them to visit that barrack. And that's a great problem because United Nations is
Is the one in charge or the one
it's been financed by United States, by United States, by Europe and other countries, and we just wanted to tell that they're wasting money. Yes.
I have to just want to switch a little bit. So we met you the last year, and Kateryna, a pleasure to have you here today. And from what on the media, you actually have met a lot of very influential people in power in a lot of different countries. You met with Pope, and what progress that you see that have been done, or is there any mechanism that can advance the exchange of prisoners of war? What have been your experience on the general, just communicating about the issues of torture in Russian prison? And is there any advancement on that side? Do you see any positive movements or anything that actually scares you? And on the side note, Kateryna, just want to really congratulate you on the fact that your husband post-treaty was, I think everyone was extremely happy to see you both together, and it was definitely something that very heartwarming for all of us. But if you can share some of the experiences that you had on the international arena with the different organizations, would be interesting for everyone to hear.
I'm pretty sure, in my opinion, if Kateryna would not found our organization, Association of Azovstal Defenders Families,
We did it together.
Uh,
Co-founder, actually.
but
So
the head of,
no.
and if she would not do this, I'm not sure that any exchanges would would happen. Yes, because we did a lot of work, a lot of advocacy work, and we were focusing the attention on this. It began when we met Pope, because the whole world knew about the Azovstal, the siege of Mariupol, and then we were working hard to release Azov people from another units, and I think that Kateryna saved her husband, and I want to hope that I did something to release Arseniy. Actually, all these small and big acts, they are very important and they are helping. And if we would continue to be vocal, to speak about prisoners of war, to do this advocacy campaign, especially in the United States, because we know that this country is one of the most powerful. We all understand that. And actually, that is the same as in the war, because everyone in Ukraine could say, oh, Russia is so big, we could not fight it. We can do some negotiations because it's so hard. We are so small and we have not enough weapons and etc. This is the same situation. Yes, when we started our organization, everyone were talking like, oh, they will die in Mariupol because that is like a death for them. But they were not all of them. Then when they went to captivity, everyone were talking, oh, your husbands would be sitting in the prisons till the end of war. They were not, as we can see, not all, but some people were released, chief commanders were released, and impossible things actually are happening during this war, and you always have to do something. I think that is our main idea.
Yeah, and actually last year we were totally inspired with POW NEO movement in the United States, and we realized that we can do the same in Ukraine for the fair future of Ukraine. And that slogan, "You're not forgotten," clearly shows that Americans support POWs. Americans has this respect and remembrance of all the heroes, and that's what inspired us actually. And we made a slogan, they were fighting for us, now we must fight for them. And we are continuing doing our job. It's like our war cry for Azovstal POWs. And we won't stop until the last soldiers is released actually. And until all the women waiting for their loved ones finally meet their loved ones. And yes, we are just continue doing all we can, connecting with intelligence service of Ukraine, security service of Ukraine, any institution who can help us, who can be friendly to us actually in our issues, POW issues. And we are trying to search for any platform, international platform, where we can show all these terrible things Russians do in captivity with our heroes. And we were everywhere in Europe, in the United States, showing all these issues, and Arseniy experience is very important to show to everyone. And we are doing it just with big respect, huge respect to our heroes who did this sacrifice job for us during all the siege in Mariupol, during all this hellish encirclement. And we're so grateful for that we are alive actually, and we can sit here. That's because of them, of their heroism actually during all this battlefield, hellish battlefield. And my husband was the youngest commander in armed forces of Ukraine who led the defense of half a million city Mariupol, and he awarded the title the Hero of Ukraine last year in March. And he always has this main rules for a commander. They are like well-trained, disciplined soldiers should be following all NATO standards, understanding what soldiers are fighting for: families, motherland, against Russian terrorists and invaders. That's what he stands for. And just trying to develop our country in more effective military way with all NATO standards. And I feel that he's so upset sitting here in Turkey because I know that he can be effective right now in counteroffensive. And I'm fighting a little bit, struggling for his release from Turkey as well, because his stay in Ukraine is important right now, not in Turkey. So right now I'm fighting for his release as well, because I know that our soldiers, our brigade, Azov brigade, needs him as a commander. And I know that we will do everything to help him to be in Ukraine, to get the motherland actually. And I live in with this quote that the living must fight for the fallen, the healthy for the wounded, and the free for the captive, actually.
Thank you. And I definitely agree that your husband is absolute hero, and he will be admired for centuries to come because of his bravery and how he leads his people, and how they highly speak of him. Anyone who is actively fighting under his command, or Tavar, who is now taking charge of Azov Brigade now. So just from bottom of my heart, and I think from pretty much anyone here in the room, we are grateful for the fact that he's there and he's alive and he's keep fighting for us, and for everything you do to release the rest of the prisoners of war. Just want to circle back a little bit to your visit to Washington, D.C., and we know that you met with some senators and some Congress people, and it appears that you met with both Republicans and Democrats. And can you just tell us, like, do you feel a big of a difference? Because the political cycle in the United States is very dramatic and can get very politicized. But in terms of support of Ukraine, it does seem that both sides appear more or less supportive of Ukraine. What was your feeling from meeting with both Republicans and Democrats, and how do they see the situation in Ukraine from just your personal experience of talking to them?
For me, the both representatives from both parties are supporting Ukraine the similar way, but Republicans are more supporting for Azov. They are more involved, informed, and this was 2 times we were in Congress. They were just more supporting us as movement, as unit.
And then as you continue your conversation with people of power in the United States, and what is the future, like plans do you have, and how we as a civil society and as diaspora abroad, as institutions like Stanford, how we can support you? What can we do to help advance your agenda and help those brothers of Arseniy who's still in captivity, and what can be done by us to support you?
To be vocal, I think, to share information, to educate people, because actually the education is our second main goal. We all know, unfortunately, that Russian propaganda is still very strong in the United States. And I think it would be great if you can talk with people you know, or write on your social medias posts about Azov, about history of Azov, about prisoners of war. Because actually, when you are talking about the true story, when you're talking about the history of this incredible unit, people start to understand actually why Russians hate them so much and why they are in such bad conditions in Russia. And they started to support Azov. So I think this is very important, even if you don't have many followers, it's still very important to write about this, to make videos, to make pictures, to draw. Everything is important to focus on this issue, to focus attention.
Yeah,
Yes.
actually working with dispelling myths, because it's so harmful for people, for soldiers who did such self-sacrifice for us. And you can choose any creative idea and creative field, making videos, making illustrations, anything you can do on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any picture, anything. Just you can create. So it's important.
I actually have a good story about that. When we were in Israel with Arseniy, he had surgery there, a treatment, and we went to Masada. Masada is actually very symbolic historical event for Jews.
If you, for those who don't know, because I did not know about that before I visited, Masada is a stronghold of Israeli troops during the Israeli-Roman War.
Israel.
Yes, Israel-Roman War.
Yes, and it's pretty similar like Azovstal siege because they stand till the end. The endings are different, but even Jews told that they were thinking about the Masada when they were watching the videos from Azovstal. And we were there and we met a rabbi, and he asked where I'm from, who we are, and Arseniy said that he is a military, he was defending Mariupol, and this rabbi on the top on Masada said, "Oh, you're heroes, I know you, I know Azov, I know the siege of Mariupol." And I understand that he read this somewhere, and if there will be more these articles, more these posts, more people would know this, and this is very important.
Okay. I probably, if any have any like remarks, and then we probably would open to the public if someone has any questions. The room is pretty cozy, so if you just want to raise your hand, and I'll point out if anyone will ask questions while you're thinking if any other comments you want to make. I do have one question that I wanted to come back to with Arseniy, or maybe Yulia or Kateryna. It seems to, at least to us, that there is no real system of how Azov battalion members are being selected for exchange, other like than a few. Is there like, do you know if there's any way like they just go down the list like you and the rest? Like, how is this process working? Have you been ever explained? Like, if you do they look at whoever been, I don't know, the most injured, who has any like severe illnesses or injuries that they sustain in Mariupol or as a result of torture? Is there any I don't know, circumstances that would make someone be like up on the list? I don't know if that's even the to describe it.
Yes, there is some priority in the list that Russians have. So during my exchange, I was maybe on the 45th place on that list. But all the people before me, Russians just didn't want to let them go for unknown reasons, for real unknown reasons. Some of the people are figurating in some fabricated criminal cases. So maybe there was a judge.
Court case. Yeah.
Yes, a court case several weeks ago against our people in the city of. And there is one thing that some people don't know. Maybe most of the people, they resigned from Azov regiment several years before the full-scale invasion. So that was a civil people during the full-scale invasion. And Russians have such tactics. They are capturing civil people on the occupied territories to enhance their exchange fund. All these exchange issues, it's like not our business, it's business of Ukrainian military intelligence. So I really don't know how things are going.
But actually, luckily, the people who were seriously wounded, they are almost all exchanged. So this priority is, I think, the most important because these people need treatment and Russians, they're not helping them.
Actually, before our defenders leave the Azovstal, my husband Denis just made a list of prioritization, First of all, it should be injured soldier, heavily injured soldier, then women combatants, regular soldiers, combatants, of course, yep, and then officers and all the commanders. Actually, as you see, something happened, like some troubles happened during all these negotiations about prioritization, and we even don't know how Russians selecting all of them. it can be like just putting the finger on anyone, and we don't know for sure what is the way they just collecting all the gathering all these surnames and etc. I
For
don't know.
example, more than 20 women from Azov are still in the prison.
Yeah.
Thank you, and we can now turn it to. You can name yourself and.
Yeah, my name is Sergey. I'm from Kyiv originally. Now I'm living in San Francisco, and I have a question for Arseniy. Arseniy, you're a hero of 1 million person. We all know about you, and I just want to know if Ukrainian counteroffensive will be very successful. What will happen next with all these people on, for example, Donbas territory? Because as we clearly understand it, there people lived 8 years with Russian propaganda, and they hate Ukrainians at all. And what will happen next when we grab this territory back? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. And I was asked this question a lot of times.
We're just talking about a few questions so the recording can capture as well.
Oh, so sorry, I can repeat the question. So just in general, the question is, if the counteroffensive is going very successful and we will be, not if, when we will retake back of occupied region of Donbas and Crimea. Specifically, the question is towards Donbas, what would happen to the people who are living there because they've been living under Russian propaganda and Russian occupation for the past almost over 9 years, and what would we have to do to like reintegrate them to Ukrainian society and just general public opinion?
When it comes about the civil people, I think for them, not a lot of things will change. Ukraine will be working on changing the public opinion, and for real, it's as I saw during like my stay in Mariupol before the full-scale invasion. It's not very hard to change the public opinion of that people, because those people are for real. Honestly, they're not very educated, and they are obsessed with hate to Ukraine only because of the tons of Russian propaganda on the TV. If you switch the TV to Ukrainian propaganda, good propaganda, of course, their opinion will change. I think it will take maybe several years, and those people will be like the most fierce patriots of Ukraine. Of course, you have to maintain the so-called social justice, so that people should not be hungry. You should provide workplaces for the people. So the social sector must be on the high level, on the good level, and opinion will change. When it comes about the combatants, I think it's obvious. Those combatants must be sentenced, but I don't think that all of them will stay at the Donbas territory. First of all, I don't think that a lot of combatants will stay alive till the end of the war, because in Mariupol, Russians showed the extensive use of mobilized people from occupied territories. They're using them as a cannon fodder. Even one of the commanders of so-called Oполчение, of the armed forces of Donetsk People Republic, that was maybe the first month of the full-scale invasion, and he told that the whole 9th Regiment of Donetsk People Republic armed forces disappeared in their attempts to assault Mariupol, and their losses, especially losses of the mobilized people from the occupied territory, are pretty high. That's dramatic losses. So I think there will be no man population in Donetsk and Luhansk regions for that time. Also, a lot of people will just escape towards Russian territory, obviously. But I think Ukraine, after liberating these territories, Ukraine should reconsider its internal policy, because one of the
one of the reasons why the war started.
Yes, one of the reasons why the war started.
Politicization of
Yes,
the-
in these regions, if the poor Ukrainian internal policy, yes, Ukraine has to use soft power, but Ukraine used no power, because Ukrainian authorities were bothered with earning money rather than building a state. Of course, it's not a question of Russian speakers. It's not a question of religion. It's not a question of ethnicity. Our Azov brigade consists maybe 60% of Russian speakers. I'm a Russian speaker. A lot of my friends are Russian speakers. This is not a question of language and so on. So I think Ukraine should reconsider its national policy to make
to make it
yes,
impossible.
to make impossible this separation on the east and on the west.
In addition, firstly, before full invasion, during these 8 years, around 1 million of people from Donbass became refugees, and they left these territories. And these people, I hope, they will return to these territories and they will live there too. And their impact on this region will be huge. So I don't think that the problem will be so big as we can now imagine. And secondly, actually, my strong belief is that time after war is a time for dialogue. When the war is over, we have to talk. Of course, I'm talking about the people who didn't commit war crimes and other crimes. If some people were just supporting Russia in their minds, I didn't do anything wrong. Of course, for me, they're enemies too, but we have to do this dialogue between us because they are Ukrainians and they are part of this country. And if they will not go, we have to build some bridges between us.
My name is Sergey, and I'm your fellow historian from Mykolaiv. By the way, wish you luck with your master's degree. My question is, what is the victory of Ukraine and how do you define it? Basically, a question for all three of you.
So the question is from another historian. He's from Mykolaiv, and the question is, what is the victory for you looks like?
I think the victory of Ukraine equals the disintegration of Russian Empire in any appearance, because for Ukraine, all the story started with the Mongol-Tatar invasion, and later with the invasion of Russian Empire. So I think that our stories are deeply connected, Ukrainian and Russian, and I think only after the disintegrating Russian Empire, only after arranging this Eastern European area, geopolitical rearrangement of this area, the victory of Ukraine will be achieved. It's not about the borders. I don't believe that we return to the borders of 1991, we will achieve victory. That's not about that. It's maybe even something metaphysical, something like that.
We will
Go
answer
ahead,
to-
Yes, yes.
Okay. For me, I think the same way, everything looks the same way. First of all, I want Ukraine to become a center of Eastern Europe, cultural, economic center. Ukraine has to possess nuclear weapon because our geographical position is very difficult, and this war can start in the future, and we have to have this like strong argument for the future. So for me, and actually, of course, to win this war, it's very difficult, but more difficult is to solve internal problems. And Ukraine still has many such problems. And when we will fight against them, I think this will be a true victory.
I join all these opinions, and I think that all empire must fall actually, and we need to have new international humanitarian organization with a headquarter place based in Kiev. Actually, it will be new like Red Cross, but more effective. I think it will be helpful
Just
for
effective.
us. Yes, just effective, yes.
My name is Olga. I was born in Shatarsky, and I'm living now in Geneva, studying and just came here for 1 week on the Facebook that this one will happen. My question is like 3 days before the beginning of the war, like we joined the popular talk shows when different participants took part, and Arseniy Fedosiuk basically told that she was raised a question about Mariupol. She told no, Mariupol. Nothing to fear about. There is 3 lines of defense, and like, don't worry. But for me, the question to you is, how did it happen? Basically, during a couple of days, that disaster basically happened. So, not only you as like military forces, the armed forces of Ukraine, you but once had to survive through that, but thousands of civilians who died. As no one declared that number of people who died, but some people were like 30,000, 70,000, that maybe the biggest catastrophe that were up to this moment. We are not
Thank you.
if you have that, then
So the question is from another person from Ukraine who's visiting here. Right before the beginning of full-scale invasion, 2 days leading to it, a lot of politicians and people of power in Ukraine were on the talk shows, and they were saying, specifically Arseniy Fedosiuk, that Mariupol has 3 lines of defense and nothing going to happen to it, and it's protected. But now we see the ruins of the city where dozens of thousands of people died, and we don't even know the estimate of how many people died there. And I don't know, like, when we will be able to estimate that number. If you can speak to it, in your opinion, like, how could that happen? How this, like, from the state of where some politicians declaring that Mariupol is protected, how we went all the way to like almost like 100,000 civilians dying in the city, if you can speak to it.
Thank you for the question. By the way, the first battalion I joined, it was called Shakhtarsk. So, about Mariupol, Russian troops were advancing simultaneously from 3 directions, from the east, from the west, and from the north. Ukrainian armored forces were ready for Russian attacks from the east, and there was several defensive lines, all defensive lines from 2014 and 2015. But we were totally unready for the attacks from the west and from the north. Honestly, the city on the northern and western borders, the city was naked in the defensive meaning. We didn't expect Russians advance from Crimea. And if you just look at the map of the southern Ukraine, all the territory from Crimea to almost to Mariupol, this territory got captured without any resistance from Ukrainian armored forces. Why? Because there were simply no Ukrainian armored forces in these cities. Such big cities as Kherson, Berdyansk, Melitopol, and other were captured without a battle. That was simply just a simple betray from some Russian rats in Ukrainian state system, because Ukrainian state system was highly infected with Russian agents, and like Mariupol was the first city to start direct confrontations with Russian forces. Till at the end of the first week of the full-scale invasion, we got total encirclement of the city. So they blocked all main roads. It was possible to leave the city with like through the fields, but all main roads were blocked. For that time, we had enough capabilities to leave the city, to go through their positions and to leave the city. But we refused to do that. And Ukrainian High Command promised us to bring reinforcement to the city, to bring supplies to help us fighting there. But for that time, Ukrainian army had no capabilities to stretch their defense on all directions. And our mission became switched from defending the city. Our mission switched to forcing Russians to concentrate a lot of their forces around Mariupol. Because in other situations, for example, imagine if we are leaving the city, we are going towards Zaporizhia, Dnipro, all that Russian troops they used to storm the city, all the troops start advancing towards Zaporizhia, Dnipro, and other big Ukrainian cities. So that might be a catastrophe for Ukraine. Also, the general that was responsible for the defense of the city, he left the city the 2 days before the full-scale invasion.
And my husband
Yes.
became commander of all Mariupol garrison, actually.
Yes, and the commander of Azov regiment, Denis Prokopenko, became the commander of the whole city defense. But he was not supposed to do that. There was some people. The general left the city, and the whole month before the full-scale invasion, he made a lot of obstacles for building defensive lines around the city. He refused us to.
He prohibited.
Yes, he prohibited us to build trenches on the western and northern borders of the city. So that was just simply a betrayal.
So, hi, my name is Vadim Rickmore from Cherkasy. Look here now. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your time here, all for your view. Two-part question. Number one, when they about you, would you want to play you on screen? And number two, you mentioned the small detail that snipers got most of the action. There was some unspoken rules that you followed that you didn't engage enemy directly. What were those?
Just repeat the question. So there are two questions from the gentleman from Cherkasy who lives here. So the first one, when there would be a movie about Azov and whom does Arseniy want to play him? I personally, just add for myself, I would suggest he played himself. And the second question, correct me if I'm wrong, is about there was some kind of like agreement or practice that there would high activity of snipers and that fighters would avoid direct confrontation, like in the battlefield. Can you speak to that?
Yes, starting from the first question, I will be happy to do that. So I'm open to any of your proposals. You already started. So about the second question, it was prohibited to advance towards enemy positions. And we can fight enemy from the distance only. It was a trench war, and we were allowed to fight only from our trenches. Ukraine to overcome Ukraine to skip all these obstacles, even invited some kind of military tactics used.
Crawl in advance.
Yes, crawl in advance. So our people were just digging trenches towards enemy directions, just to make the distance between us shorter, and to force our enemy to leave its positions. But there was a lot of such cases when, for example, we forced our enemy to leave their trenches. And we received a call from Kyiv, from General Staff, and some senior Ukrainian officials are trying to punish us for our combat actions. So because before they received a call from Moscow or from Donetsk, whatever, and they were told, what's going on? We have like a status quo here. So why you are assaulting us? And we got punished for our combat activity on the front line. So a lot of times we went to work on the front line unofficially. It was called like a gray operation or a black operation. So the white is an official operation, the black and the gray is semi-official and unofficial. And in such like gray and black operations, if you get wounded, you receive no compensation from the government. You can even be a part of a criminal case, and so on.
Can you just clarify, was this prior to the full-scale invasion?
Yes,
Yeah.
it was prior.
Just want to make sure that it's clear.
That was especially from 2016 till 2021.
Thank you.
And also, I'm not sure that everyone here knows that Ukraine paid extra money to soldiers who were not attacking Russians. And if you were attacking, you can
You could lose your.
you can lose your money. Yes. So it was like a system.
They wanted to buy us, but we are priceless.
Hi, my name is Nick. I'm part of Nova Ukraine, from charity here in Stanford. Arseniy, thank you for being here with us today. I think you guys are heroes, and your bravery and your sacrifice in defending the city of Mariupol was truly extraordinary, and we are all grateful. My question is, how many Azov soldiers today remain in captivity? And can you recognize any global leaders or celebrities who have been helpful in getting these folks released or exchanged?
Just repeat the questions in general. So if it's known how many Azov fighters are now still in as a prisoners of war in Russian captivity, and if there are any international leaders or celebrities that have been active or supportive in advancing the exchange of prisoners of war, specifically from Azov battalion?
Nowadays, there are around 700, not around 700 of our people in Russian captivity. Half of them are now being kept in Donetsk, in the prison in Donetsk. Half of them are being kept in Taganrog, the prison I visit. About the help, the question of the exchanges of our people and the risk of our people, it's like a political and a military question. As a military, I can say, how can I help this situation? How can I influence this situation? I can go to the front line and capture more Russians. Yes, obviously, that's the simplest way. The second way is the political way, and here we should receive some support from senior officials, senior politics from United States, I think from Great Britain, and from Europe. You was asking who is already helping us.
We definitely know that Erdogan took part in negotiations for the release of chief commanders of Azov. Also, some representatives from Congress are very supportive for us, specifically Victoria Spars. She loves Azov so much, and she's supporting us through all this year. The last time we were in Congress, we visited Atlantic Council, and Paul Massaro, he is just obsessed with Azov, and he is supporting us too.
Shout out to Paul Massaro, he's a great guy.
Yeah, my name is Igor. I was born and raised in Odessa. And Arseniy, first of all, I can't express how grateful I am to you and to all the brave and Ukrainian soldiers who keep defending our country. And you're all heroes forever. So my question is, could you tell us a bit more about the man you fought with, your brothers in arms? Like, what was the relationship, the morale, maybe you have some interesting funny stories to tell. Thank you.
The question is from John Odessa about the brothers from Azov whom Arseniy fought with. If there are any like interesting or clever stories to share with us.
So I was a part of reconnaissance company. Our company consisted of 45 people. It was predominantly the people of my age. So from 21 to 30. Some of them were like 45, but several of them. All of us came from different parts of Ukraine. We had people from Lviv, from Donetsk, from Mariupol, from Kiev region. So it's like
Crimea.
yes, from Crimea even, from different parts of Ukraine. All people have different origin. All of us had different occupation, different education. Some people had like only school education. Some of them have bachelor's, master's degrees, and so on. The fact that I was a part of reconnaissance company, that it was like a special military unit inside the Azov regiment, and that helped us to maintain the high level of morale during all the siege of Mariupol. Because for us, it was inappropriate to refuse fighting. For us, it was inappropriate to like. There were a lot of difficult times in Mariupol, but when I look at my brothers in arms, continuing fighting just day by day, at day, at night, just round the clock, I can't lose my own motivation to fight. What about the funny stories? There were a lot. No, that was not a funny story.
You can share it.
Yes, it's very hard to come up with thoughts.
I mean, we recognize there's a lot of dark humor during the
Yes,
siege,
yes.
so
Predominantly the dark humor. But I will think about it. Maybe I will share it later.
Wonderful, please. Can you tell us your favorite joke? It could be in Ukrainian or Russian if you choose.
Well, it's very strange joke. It's absurdic humor. I'm a very big fan of absurdic humor. So I will tell you it's in Russian. I don't know how to translate it. So maybe almost all of us understand like Slavic languages. So it's very. Please don't judge me. It's very absurdic. So the joke. Да. Армяне лучше, чем грузины. Чем лучше? Чем грузины. You know the joke?
Yeah, I know the joke.
Yeah, it's pretty absurdic. It's a special kind of humor.
He told me the joke when he was flirting with me. And it worked.
A good joke. It worked for me as well.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Oksana. I'm from Lviv, but I grew up in the States. Julia mentioned the importance of dialogue. So given all the different narratives about the Azov brigade and Ukraine in general, have you found that there are any approaches or strategies that work better or worse in addressing misinformation or propaganda?
I think actually the best strategy is to tell people truth. For example, when I had an interview in Israel, the journalist, he was very involved in Russian propaganda, and he was actually like shocked when I said that in Azov brigade there were Jews. So when you are sharing this kind of information, which is broken all these narratives, this works the best way, because actually Russians and their propaganda is very stupid. Because when they called us so neo-Nazis, and you showed that Jews, Crimea Tatars are fighting in Azov together, this is absurd, just like this joke, because it could not be true. And for example, also I always share the fact that many Azov militaries, their native language is Russian. And we know that one of the biggest narrative of this war is saving Russian speakers by Russian Federation in Donbass. And Putin actually killed, I think, the biggest amount of Russian speakers in Ukraine. And Azov militaries, they are defending Russian speakers, they are saving them, fighting for them. And this strategy actually works because during this year, we did a lot of work. For example, Meta, their platforms, they banned Azov during 8 years of war. And we had many communication with them, conversations, and now they deleted Azov from their ban list. And Azov Brigade has its verified accounts on Facebook and Instagram. So it is not so fast as we want, because for us, they're heroes. And for us, it was really hard to hear all these questions when we were in Rome, when we had a meeting with Pope. We did a lot of interviews and we were asked about so-called neo-Nazism everywhere. And for us, that was really surprising, I guess, because these heroes are fighting, the heroes are so standing men, and this is the most horrible siege and the battle from World War II, and you're asking about these stupid narratives of Moscow. But then we understood that we just have to do our work, and this is not a place for emotions. You just have to answer all these questions again and again. And someday it would work, and actually it is working right now.
And also I want to add that I'm also asking people to look at the actual information, to look at the actions of our military unit. From 2014, we were located in the city of Mariupol. We were all the time working on the battlefield. And from that time, such organization as OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, worked closely on this in this area. So all the time they were looking at Azov, at other military units, and there is no single report about war crimes, some crimes based on ethnicity, language, nationality, and so on. So I don't think that these organizations could be so blind, not to see such cases if such cases will be present. So we use such a strategy. We ask people to look at the facts.
We have time for about 2 more questions. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kateryna. I'm not Ukrainian, I'm Armenian, and on behalf of non-Ukrainians, thank you for everything you're doing. It's an incredible amount, and I don't think I can put it into words right now. I was wondering, during your experiences, there is clear evidence, at least through your words, of Russian crimes against humanity. Let's put it that way. Do you feel like during the war and during their time in Russia, in person, of course, that there was any sign of free media trying to investigate the truth? And that kind of evidence is essential for real convictions in the International Criminal Court, which isn't very useful right now. But do you feel like there is any evidence of free media in Russia?
Thank you for the question. Just to repeat it, so from what Arseniy has been saying, and from what we see in Ukraine, there is a lot of information about torture and crimes against humanity for Ukrainian prisoners of war that are in Russia. And the question is, have you seen any evidence of international media trying to investigate this humanity or trying to investigate war crimes that committed by Russians against Ukrainians.
In Mariupol, during the siege of Mariupol, there were a bunch of international representatives of international media trapped in the city, and they filmed a lot of material about that. I don't remember actual names.
Associated Press, they made really good work there. They released a huge investigation, and they took the famous photos from Rodoma.
Oh my God. Maternity ward.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Appreciate it.
So, and for me, actually, these people are true journalists because they did a huge work, and actually they could die there, and some people died there, and that is actually connected with previous question, because another journalist during all these 8 years, they took money from Moscow and they wrote all these articles about Azov, about Ukraine, about so-called far-right movements in Ukraine. And actually, these were journalists from very big and very famous media.
Yes, also there is a director. Sorry, I don't remember his name. I have big troubles with my memory after captivity.
He's Lithuanian.
He's Lithuanian by nationality, and he was trapped in Mariupol, and he died in Mariupol. But he succeeded to
Transfer some.
Yes,
of
to
the
transfer
materials.
the flashcards with that films to the Ukrainian mainland, and now they released a movie about Mariupol. You can just Google Lithuanian director in Mariupol, so the Google will answer, so you can find it. What about prisons, Russian prisons? Of course, that no one single representative of free media was admitted there. They invited only either Russian media, which are totally controlled by Russian. Yes, yes, Steven Seagal.
So you have a representative there.
Yes, Steven Seagal was invited to Olenivka prison several weeks after the terror attack.
And filmed all these terrorist acts committed by Russians.
Yes, he pretended to be like a third part in the story, but of course he was totally obsessed with Russian narratives. Yes, and I know that it doesn't matter.
But
by the time for him.
To finalize the answer, in my opinion, there are no free independent media in Russia, and some independent liberal media, Russian media, they are located in Europe. So they don't have any extra information, they don't have these investigations, and this work is not full.
Thank you for this, for done and what you are doing for everyone. My name is Andy. I'm originally from Kyiv. And as most of the people here who are Ukrainian trying to communicate with friends, with workers, with anyone, we kind of occasionally talk about the war. And one of the very common myths, it's not really the result of the Russian propaganda, it's really a myth, right? A modern myth, especially in the States, that this is Putin's war. This is only Putin's war, right? Like, you can't blame nation, right? You can't blame Russians in the war. What would be your arguments in such a conversation? What would be your arguments to, in a short conversation with someone, explain that this is not just Putin's war?
Let me just repeat the question. So the question is, there is this current myth in the world that it's Putin's war against Ukraine, and it's just a myth. So what would be your rebuttal to this myth in the conversation? How would you try to debunk these myths that it's not only Putin's war against Ukraine, it's Russian war against Ukraine?
You can look at the latest sociological researchers in Russian Federation, and they say that around 80% of Russian population support this so-called special military operation. From my personal experience, I can say that during our stay in Russian prisons, I realized how high is the rate of hate towards Ukrainians from Russian people. I think that most of the politically active people in Russian Federation are now obsessed with hate to but like political active people are also always a minority. But also in Russia, we have a silent majority. And that silent majority have the same responsibility for this war as this political active minority. I don't think that we can live together with Russians in peace for the next several decades. It will be very hard. First of all, Russia should reconsider its historical past, and it should reconsider its approach towards Ukraine, towards Belarus, towards all these regions, all these nations in the region. But it's not the Putin's war. It's not the Putin who is killing our people, who is sending rockets towards peaceful Ukrainian cities. It's not the Putin. And we here, people in the United States, don't realize how big is this story in Russia, how big is this hate towards Ukrainian language, national identity, Ukrainian state.
And also, if Putin is only responsible for this war, I guess he's the only person who is responsible for the World War II, and we can tell this to the Jews, and I think they would be not so happy with this statement. And Hannah Arendt, a famous philosopher, she wrote a book in which she said that
The
feeling of guilt.
The guilt could not be general, but responsibility is general in every historical moment. So, of course, not all of the Russians are killing Ukrainians, but all of them are responsible for that, because during this, I guess, 20 years, they were okay with Putin and his regime. And I can tell that because when someone like Putin decided to grab power in Ukraine, I was on the Maidan and I did everything to just went him away. And this is, I think, the main problem, because even when we will win this war, many Russians will be still believing that they are part of big, huge empire, and this would be like, I think, the second war just to change their minds.
To confirm all these arguments, you can just show to the people who are asking these questions all the videos from streaming services with regular Russian who are supporting Putin's regime war against Ukrainians. Just random interviews during the walkings in different cities over Russia. So you can just show all these videos to confirm that it's not only Putin's war.
And also we can count all Russian troops. We can count all their families or their relatives. When you are a soldier, you have like a moral imperative to decide. You can actually go to prison. You can refuse to do this, to do the orders and just go to prison. You always have a chance to decide, because this is what makes you actually a person, not a thing. If Russians are not responsible for that, they're not people. They are just things.
Okay. Thank you, Dora. Yeah. Sorry.
My name is Anna. I'm familiar with Julia, and I want to thank you so much on behalf of the team, on the consulate, on behalf of family who's in Ukraine. Thanks to you, the Ukrainians can be right now in cities with part of South Africa. And it's extremely important that you are here today, because unfortunately it's true that Russian propaganda and bots, unfortunately. And I also want to say that I remember Yulia last autumn, and she was very strong, and she was fighting like a bird. And right now I see you together, and I'm really thankful you are here, and you're alive and strong. And we will continue to, we don't have any choice. We will liberate our territories, we will return our soldiers, women, children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Героям слава.
Once again, I just want to say thank you to Department of Slavic Languages and Literatures for helping us with the venue. I want to say thank you to Ukrainian Students Association for organizing this event and this visit. And deep thank you to Kateryna, Yulia, and Arseniy. And we could not be more grateful for the fact that you are here with us at Stanford. And we hope to see you again here in the future and teaching us more about free Ukraine and everything else you want to teach us about. It's been definitely a pleasure. Thank you so much, everyone, for visiting today. And the only thing I have left to say, Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Slava Ukraini! Slava Nації! Україна! Good tradition from last year. Thank you so much.